Hello everyone, welcome to another live stream. My name is Lar Ryan and this is Complete Test Success. So we are just doing a Q&A today. So basically any questions you have about any parts of the IELTS test, you can just type those into the comments and I'll answer them for you. Or if you want to tell me the problems you're having with the IELTS test, and I will give you solutions to overcome those problems. So that's essentially what we're doing here today. You ask your questions, you tell me your problems, and I will give you the best advice that I can. And that should hopefully help you to improve your scores. And that's essentially it for, that's essentially what we're doing here today. Al Bagir, hi to you. Welcome to the lesson. Good to see you here. If you have any questions, please go ahead. Feel free to ask. I've had a few students recently where they have their IELTS test coming up, quite soon. So, their test is coming up in 2 or 3 days. So they did a practice speaking test with me. It's the first time I met them, and their test is very soon. Now, typically speaking, I won't let students join my course when they have a test coming up very soon, because I want to make sure that I have enough time with them to help them improve their scores. But these students were just doing a practice speaking test. They just wanted to get an idea of what their level was and what to do. And in general, when your speaking test is coming up incredibly soon, I would recommend just to focus on your fluency. Focus on your fluency, because there isn't enough time to improve your vocab, grammar, and pronunciation. If you've got 2 or 3 days left before the test, you just focus on, the area that needs that, well, not the area that needs your attention most, but the area that's realistic to improve in a short period of time. So I'm just mentioning that now because it is something that's come up a few times with students I've been interacting with recently. I'll be here. Richard, I'm a friend of Mr. Okay. Do you have courses for TOEFL? No, I don't. So all of my courses are for the IELTS test. I don't teach other parts. I don't teach other tests. My expertise is with IELTS, and I have been teaching IELTS since 2010. I've been an IELTS examiner. I don't have much experience with TOEFL. I'm slightly aware of the format. But no, I don't have specific advice on exam skills for TOEFL or the format of the TOEFL test. I'm not familiar with the test. Mohammed Yusuf, hello to you. Welcome. Welcome to the lesson. Yeah, perfect. Hi, Shardar. Good to see you here. Welcome to the lesson. Okay, so any questions you have, please go ahead. Let me know what questions you have. Let me provide some support to you. Send me your link. I'm not sure what link you're looking for. Suppose you were asking about TOEFL courses, so you're likely asking for a link to my academy. Okay. As I said, I also have like essay corrections and practice speaking tests, but you'll find all of those services there if that's what you're looking for. Keep in mind though, I do turn students away quite often where, if students want to join my course and they don't have realistic goals. So I'll get students who, they got a band 5 recently and they need a band 7, next week, that type of thing. I don't work with students who don't have realistic goals because I know I can't help them in a short period of time. If someone is a band 5 and they want a band 7 and they have enough time to improve, by all means, that's absolutely fine. So I'm not trying to be snobby, but I'm just trying to be realistic. If you're trying to get a really high score, you're currently a low level and you're trying to get a really high score in a really short period of time, we can't work magic. And especially if your problem is, if your weaknesses are with, let's say, like vocab or grammar, where it's going to take you some, a while to improve, there's no point in being dishonest. So, do reach out. If you want to send me an email, that's my email address, lar@completetestsuccess.com. But I will ask a few questions just to make sure that you have a realistic goal. So yeah, hopefully we'll be able to work together. Shamrat, give tips for listening multiple choice questions. Yeah, so I made a video for this before, and basically the problem with multiple choice questions is there's just so much reading involved. So what you have is you have the question, and then you have the options to choose from, and you only have 30 seconds to get ready. So what happens is you have 30 seconds to get ready. You get to read a little bit, but you're not finished. There are also other question types you need to prepare for. The audio starts, so now you're trying to listen to the audio and read the questions at the same time. There's just too much to do. So that's typically where the problem comes from with those question types. So what I like to do is I like to break it down into different parts, right? So the first thing you'll do, you've got 30 seconds to get ready. Don't read the options, just read the question. So you've got a question and 3 options. Read the question, don't worry about the options. Read the next question, read the next question, read the next question. So at least that makes you aware of what information you're looking for. So before the audio starts, you've read the questions. Then as the audio is playing, you're going to make notes. So when you hear the answer for the first one, you make a little note, be it on your piece of paper or wherever, on the bit of note paper you have. Make a little note of what the answer is. So if you've heard the answer, make a note. And as you go along, you're making little notes where you hear the answers. Now, the reason that you're making notes instead of choosing the options is if you try to choose the option while the audio is playing, you spend all your time reading those 3 options, trying to decide which is the appropriate one and match it with the answer that you heard, and the audio is gone. So you're after going like 3 or 4 questions down, and you're still focusing on this question. So what you're doing is you make a note so that you can continue listening, and then you make a note of the next one and you continue listening. Then after the audio has finished, that's when you go back and you choose the correct option. So when the audio has finished, you have 30 seconds before the next section. So you're going back, looking at your note. There's no audio playing, so you have a bit of, well, I wouldn't say free time, but you have a bit of time where there's nothing else going on. So go back, look at your note, look at the 3 options, choose the correct one. Next note, look at the options, choose the correct one. So what you've done is, instead of trying to do everything at the same time, you've broken it down into 3 different tasks that you're doing at different times. Before the audio, read the questions. During the audio, make notes of the answers you hear. After the audio, choose the correct option. So that's why I would recommend that. Why am I getting 7.5 and sometimes 6 in IELTS reading tests using Cambridge IELTS books? This is an important part of improving your reading scores and your listening scores. Is you need to figure out what's gone wrong for each individual question. So it could be a particular question type that you're having difficulty with. So maybe what you'll find is when there's a particular question type, be it, summary completion, when that question comes up, you tend to get more wrong with that question type than you do with the other question types. So keep an eye out. But basically what you need to do is, after you've done a practice test, look at every incorrect answer you've chosen and figure out what went wrong. So for each incorrect answer, write down the question type and the specific reason why you got the answer wrong. So it could be that you read the instructions incorrectly, and it said 1 word and a number, and you wrote down 2 words and a number. So you got the question wrong because you didn't follow the instructions carefully enough. It could be you didn't understand the vocab. It could be you were rushing because you were worried you wouldn't have enough time to finish because you were trying to read quickly. You kind of didn't notice the answer and kind of, you weren't focusing on what you were reading, or you weren't reading slowly enough that you could process what you were reading. It could be multiple reasons. But once you start to figure out why you're getting the answers wrong, then you'll be able to come up with solutions. Now, it could be a question type. It could be a topic. Like there might be some topic comes up where you're really unfamiliar with the topic and you don't have any of the vocab you need to understand the text. When that happens, you're getting a lower score. It could be a question type. It could be that you were rushing a bit more during that test. We don't know. The truth is we don't know until you start to analyze your reading tests. And that's a very important part of the process. So do a reading test, analyze your mistakes, understand specifically what's gone wrong for each of those answers. Once you start to understand the mistakes, the solutions become pretty obvious in most cases. And Prince, I'm very good. Thank you. What is the difference between a well-developed response and sufficiently developed response in IELTS speaking? So let me have a quick look at the band descriptors here. So that's going to be under the fluency and coherence score. So I'm just trying to find, where did you see this? A sufficiently developed response and a well-developed response. Which band scores are you looking at? Yeah, so I can't find the specific comment that you're talking about. Which band scores are you reading those from, Prince? So well-developed response and sufficiently developed response. Which fluency band scores, fluency and coherence band scores are you looking at? Let me know and I'll go back. Oh, I see your comment here. 7 and 8. Okay, so let me share my screen. It might be easier to talk about what we're looking at here. Okay, so you're saying 7 and 8. Band 8, fluent with only occasional repetition or self-correction. Hesitation may occasionally be used to find words or grammar, but most content is related. Topic development is coherent, appropriate, and relevant. So I still don't see what you're referring to here in the speaking band descriptors. So I'm not 100% sure what you're talking about, Prince. If you want to have another look and let me know, but in the speaking band descriptors, it doesn't use those terms. So I can't really answer that question at the moment, but take another look, make sure that we're talking about the right thing. And I'll be happy to answer that for you. Shamrat, thank you so much. You're very welcome. No problem at all. Abdul, sir, sometimes we come across with unfamiliar words in the reading section and answer of questions dependent on answer. Any advice, sir, on this? Right. So the way that I recommend doing the reading test is that you're going paragraph by paragraph. Now, a lot of teachers would recommend that you go question by question. My advice is that you're going paragraph by paragraph. And by doing that, you can use the context of the paragraph, the context of what you're reading, to guess the meaning of unfamiliar words. And that's an important skill in reading, is to be able to guess the meaning from context and apply that. The problem if you're going question by question is that you have to look for a keyword in the question, and then you go skimming and scanning, and you just hope that you find a word or another synonym. And, it's very dependent on your knowledge of vocab. But if you're going paragraph by paragraph, where you read the full paragraph from start to finish, like a normal piece of, like as you would read anything, and then there will be words you don't understand, but then, learning the meaning from context, or at least guessing the meaning from context and using that. Of course, your guess might be wrong and you might get the answer wrong, but at least you're using all the information you have to make the best possible guess. And learning the meaning, to be able to guess the meaning from context, is a skill in itself. And if you never do that, you're probably not going to get very good at doing it. So, some people, they'll read a text, and as soon as they see a word they don't understand, they're gone straight to the dictionary, find the meaning, and then they continue. But you should allow yourself to guess first. And then whether you're right or wrong doesn't really matter. You can go and check the dictionary later. But, give yourself that opportunity to kind of get better at that particular skill. And of course, if you don't know the word, the chances of you getting the answer right are lower than if you do know the word. but that's the reality of the reading test. And there will definitely be words that you don't understand, so it's nice to be able to apply that to the unknown words, and to at least hopefully get an answer right out of it. Okay, and Alex, hi Alex. Can we use illustrate in task 1 introduction, like the graph illustrates information about something? Yep, definitely. Illustrate and show. Definitely illustrate is a word you can always use. It's the word I normally use when I'm paraphrasing in task 1. Shamrat, is it important to write the numbers for both years whenever we get 2 years in writing task 1? Yeah, it depends on exactly what you're talking about, but you would need to say what you're talking about. Like if you're talking about a line graph, like, if you're talking about a line graph, like, and you're given a point, you have to say what's the information on the y-axis and what's the information on the x-axis. Like, if you just say what it is here and not what it is here, it's impossible to understand what you're talking about. There are situations where you can say, like, it began with a figure of, the initial figure was, like, you can say those types of things to say what it was in the first year on the graph. So it's not necessarily that you have to give the name of the year every single time. And then similarly for the final year, you can say in the final year, at the end of the period, those types of things. So there are other ways to describe the years. Instead of saying, in 1990 it was this, and in 2000 it was that, you can say in 1990 it was this, and after 10 years it had, risen to that. So there are ways around just repeating the name of the year all the time, but you do need to make it clear what you're talking about. So absolutely, it's a necessity that the person can understand what you're describing. And outside the context of that, there are ways of avoiding repetition within the name of the year you're talking about. Sir, how long my speaking part 1 answer should be? Like 3 to 4 sentences? Just stay talking. If you have more to say, continue talking. So it's not really, put it this way, it's your job to show that you can speak. Now, if you speak for 3 or 4 sentences and you have nothing else to say, it's time to stop. It's a bad idea if you go back and start repeating the same stuff again. That's not a good idea. So with every answer, eventually you'll get to the point where you've said everything you can think of saying, you have nothing else to say. That's an indication that you need to stop. But if you have more to say, there's no reason to stop after 3 or 4 sentences. So like, if it's a little story you're telling and there's more detail that you haven't talked about yet, by all means, continue. That's no problem at all. I hear this a lot where students think that their answers need to be short in part 1. No, that's not true. I mean, your fluency score is dependent on, are you developing your answers or not? So your job is to show that you're very capable of speaking in English and that you can develop your answers and you can stay going and take long turns. Now, the examiner's job is to keep the exam on track. So they can't ask you question 1 and let you speak for a full 5 minutes. Their job is to get through enough questions, to make sure they cover enough topics, to make sure that they finish within 5 minutes, finish part 1 within 5 minutes. So that's their job. That's their responsibility. So that's why when you're in the test and you're speaking, the examiner will interrupt you. And like, in the middle of your answer, they'll, thank you. They'll interrupt you, stop you in the middle of what you're saying and move on, because that's their job. So I think what happens is a lot of students, or a lot of candidates, they feel like they've done something wrong because the examiner's interrupting them. And they don't want to create that situation again. And they start giving shorter answers. But that's not your job. The examiner's job is to keep it on track. And it does seem rude when the examiner's interrupting you. I know that. But that's just part of the format of the test. You can't let that worry you. And you can't let that dictate how you answer questions. So your job is to develop them as fully as you can. the examiner's job is to decide if they've heard enough and they want to move on. So yeah, you don't worry about that. Just if you have more to say, continue. If you have nothing more to say, stop. That's basically how you do it. Sir, is it necessary to learn all clauses, participle, conditional, for writing task 2 to achieve a high band score? I mean, I think if you're not able to use those, if you find that there's an area of grammar that you're not able to use, you should learn how to use it. But it's not that you need to use every single type of complex structure in your essay. You know, it's not a situation where you're expected to use all of them. You need to use a range, but it should be you're using the structure that suits the topic you're discussing. You know, you shouldn't go into into the test and say like, okay, I want to use these 7 structures, and okay, I've used that one, now I need to use the next one, now I'm going to use another. Like, if you're thinking about it like a math puzzle, you're not really going to write very naturally. So yes, you need to be able to use them because they're part of the English language, and if you're not able to use some of them, you know, that's a gap in your knowledge. But don't go into the test thinking that way, where it's like, okay, I want to use these 7 structures in my task 2 essay, and then you're trying to bend the essay around which structure you haven't used yet to fit it in, and it'll become kind of awkward and unnatural. And also, the examiner is not looking for a particular set of structures. So, you know, it's not like they have a checklist where they're checking off like, okay, there's second conditional, okay, fine, okay, we have a participle, okay, that's great. You know, they're not looking for specific structures. They're just looking for a range, and are you using those structures appropriately to match the situation that you're talking about? So it's necessary to learn them, but it's not necessary to go in and try to use them all, you know. And if you can use them well, you'll know when it's the right time to use them, and when it's, you know, when you're forcing it into your essay. So yeah, do learn them, but don't push yourself into using specific structures that you've learned in your test. Okay, Shamrat, is it important to use idioms and phrases in order to get 7 or higher in IELTS speaking? No, this is a common misunderstanding. So for your vocabulary score, the question says that you must use idiomatic language, right? So an idiomatic language, like imagine if it's, I'm not feeling well, or I wasn't feeling well. Or you could say, you know, I was a bit under the weather that day. So under the weather is an idiomatic phrase, but it's not an idiom. So an idiom would be like, you know, oh, it's raining cats and dogs, or, you know, I was burning the midnight oil, or when I was knee high to a grasshopper. We've got these like really old fashioned phrases that aren't really used in, you know, modern English. And what happens is a lot of candidates think that they need them. They go and learn them. They force them into their answers. They sound very unnatural, and it's not actually what the examiner is looking for. So it's a very common mistake. So I would say you shouldn't be learning any language in particular to use in your test. What you would do is just continue learning, just continue studying vocabulary. And, you know, the more vocab you learn, the more of these phrases you'll naturally pick up. So it wouldn't be that you go into the test and you go, okay, I'm going to try and use lots of idiomatic language. If you naturally use those phrases, allow yourself to use them. If you naturally don't, well, then, you know, you're only making things more complicated by learning special words for the test and trying to use words you normally wouldn't use in the middle of the test, you know, on top of the fact that you're probably going to be very stressed already anyway. So yes, higher scores would have more idiomatic language, but they wouldn't necessarily be learning words, especially for the purpose of the IELTS test. Just as your English improves, as your range of vocab improves, you'll naturally have a wider range. And then just normal like idiomatic phrases would include like phrasal verbs. So, things like hang out with my friends, like that's an idiomatic phrase. So something as simple as that would be considered idiomatic. So no, don't go learning idioms, and as well, don't try to force that type of language into your speaking into your answers during the speaking test. You're more likely to just kind of make things more complicated for yourself. And it's better to use the language you're familiar with. That'll make sure that you get as good a fluency score as possible. Hey, Patience. Good to see you here. Yeah, so you must use idiomatic language to get a band 7. That's correct, but not idioms. They're different. They're different things. Like idioms would fit within idiomatic language, but that's not, you don't need to sound like somebody from, 200 years ago. You don't want to sound like, a character in a Shakespeare play. You want to speak the normal everyday English that people speak nowadays. Like that's the goal. Like the IELTS test is to see, can you communicate in English? Can you communicate in spoken English? And just using normal vocab to communicate clearly, that's basically what you need to do. Prince, if I make an analogy, will it be counted as idiomatic language? No. No. So the idiomatic language is the vocabulary. It's about the vocab that you're using. So no, that definitely wouldn't count as vocab. No. World Sport TV. Hello to you. Welcome to the lesson. You only have 2 days left for your exam. Okay. So there's only so much you can do with that much time. I was actually talking about this at the start of the lesson. When it comes to speaking, just focus on fluency and try to clear your mind of everything except the idea that you want to talk about. Because where a lot of candidates go wrong is they go into the test, they're like, okay, I'm going to use difficult vocab, I'm going to use complicated grammar, I'm going to use words that I would normally never use, I'm going to use grammar structures that I'm not really comfortable using. So they're trying to do all of this extra stuff, and then they go like, oh, and there's this pronunciation mistake that I normally make, I need to make sure I don't make that, and I need to think of my ideas so I can answer the question. It's like, that is too complicated. Just keep it simple. Just focus on what exactly is your answer. What do you want to talk about? And try to communicate that clearly. And in the run up to the speaking test, for speaking, just focus on improving your fluency. When it comes to writing, you want to focus on like task achievement, task response, coherence, cohesion. There's not much you can do in terms of vocab and grammar in 2 days. So again, you don't want to make it too complicated for yourself. Just try and keep it simple, work on the basics. And the same with reading and listening. It might be just, we were talking earlier about analyzing your practice tests. So you might want to do that a little bit. Or if you've already been doing it, just going back and reviewing the types of mistakes you've made previously so you can remember not to make them again in your test. So yeah, those would be the main things. Hi, Anas. I just wanted to thank you for all you do for us in terms of recorded lessons and live feedback. Much appreciated. You're very welcome. My pleasure. And thanks for saying so. Prince, thank you so much. You helped me a lot. You're very welcome, Prince. No problem. Yep, no problem at all. You're very welcome, and best of luck with your test in 2 days. Hopefully it all goes well. Hi, Abdul. Are Cambridge book questions enough for speaking test preparation, or we should refer to any other source for preparation for this particular section? So for the speaking test, those Cambridge books would be more useful for your reading and your listening, because you need those practice tests so that you can figure out what the format of the test is like. And so that you can figure out what types of mistakes you're making and how to fix those mistakes. But for speaking, they're not all that useful. You got 4 practice tests, you get through those quick enough. And the thing is, when it comes to speaking, you need to break it down into the 4 components. So we have fluency, vocab, grammar, and pronunciation. So which of those things are you trying to improve? And if your vocab isn't good enough and you need to improve your vocab, well, those Cambridge IELTS books, they're not really going to do anything for you in terms of improving your vocab. If you want to improve your vocab, you've got to go, study vocab, find words you want to learn, add them to a notebook, review them over and over again. But also, if you're studying vocab, that's not going to improve your pronunciation. So you need to figure out what it is you're trying to improve, fluency, vocab, grammar, or pronunciation, and take the necessary action to fix that thing. And that's a big part of like the practice tests that I do with my students, is telling them what their weakness is. So if you know what your weakness is, like your main mistake is you're making subject verb agreement mistakes, and that's stopping you from getting a band 6, or sorry, that's stopping you from getting a band 7 in grammar. That's the only thing you need to fix. Once you fix that, you'll be able to get your score. That type of thing. So once you know what your mistakes are and you fix them, your scores go up. But if you're just like looking at practice questions in a book, you might not necessarily be making any improvement at all. So it just depends what you need to do and what you're trying to do. I will write about my score, sir, from Uzbekistan. Yep, good. Looking forward to hear your results. Really, really scared about my speaking exam. How to overcome? To be honest, I think everybody's pretty scared in the speaking test. Like, I think just accepting that you're going to be very nervous is part of it. So if you're going into the test saying, I hope I'm not nervous, you're going to be more scared when you're nervous, because you were expecting yourself to be more capable when you weren't nervous. But then when you are nervous, it's kind of like you're playing games with your head games. So if you can at least accept that you're going to be nervous in the test, and that's something you're going to have to deal with. It's unfortunate. It would be better if it wasn't that way, but that's reality. And it's not just you. So it's not that people who are nervous get a band 5 and people who are not nervous get a band 9. It doesn't work like that. Like, the people who get high scores in the speaking test, they're nervous too. Everybody's nervous going into the speaking test, or at least the vast majority of people are nervous going into the speaking test. And the other thing then is just to, like, really prepare yourself, and work on your weaknesses. So are you scared going into the speaking test because your vocab isn't good? Like, is the problem that your vocab isn't good and you know that and you're not fixing that problem? So it could be that as well. So kind of subconsciously, you have a big problem and you're not really fixing it. And then, it's kind of obvious why your scores aren't improving or why you're nervous if you're already aware of a problem you're not fixing. So, accept if you have a problem, acknowledge it and start working on it. And also just accept that you're probably going to be nervous in the test to a certain extent anyway. And there's not really much you can do about that. Unfortunately, that's just part of the test. And so I developed my language over the years by following debates and lectures. This affected my language such that it is not natural. I do not sound much like a native speaker when I speak or write. The vocabulary and grammatical structures that I tend to use, especially grammatical structures, are not the simplest or most concise. But that's not a problem. So, what I'm saying is, when you go to the speaking test, you should speak the way you normally speak. So if it's somebody who doesn't normally use a wide range of structures, and they go into the test and they try to do that, well, they're doing something that they wouldn't normally do, and they're making things more complicated. They're going to get lower fluency score than they could, because now they're trying to do too many things. But for you, if that's the way you naturally speak, that's the way you should speak in the IELTS test. So someone who naturally speaks in a formal way, that's what they should do. They should speak that way in the test. Someone who would naturally speak in an informal way, that's what they should do in the test. So, it's about letting yourself be as close to what you would sound like outside the test. instead of going into the test and going, okay, today I'm going to do something that I would never normally do, because you're not going to perform as well if you're trying to adapt and change the way you speak. So it's not that you shouldn't use the vocab and grammar that is more academic or more formal. It's that you should allow yourself to speak whatever way is most comfortable, and using the language you're most familiar with, like that. Hey Daniel, are we given enough time to read the questions in the listening part before the audio plays? Not really, to be honest. It depends on the question type, but we were just talking about multiple choice questions earlier in the lesson. There isn't really enough time to read all of those before the audio plays. So it depends on the question type. Sometimes yes and sometimes no. Okay, guys, so I'm not sure if anyone has any more questions. We'll wait on another few seconds here. And if no one else has questions, we'll finish up here for this week. I will be back next week. I'll have another live stream. Should be on Tuesday again next week. And we'll be focusing on another part of the test. So Q&A today. Next week will be academic writing task 1. So if you need help with that part of the test, feel free to come along, and I'll have more support for you there. And I think that's going to be it for this week. Thanks for joining. See you next week. If anyone needs more support, reach out here and we'll see if I can get you onto one of my IELTS courses. So till next time, take care of yourselves and bye-bye.